Alright, so this week I decided to look into two movies. One a wide release and one a Netflix movie that I actually probably should have seen last week, but I totally forgot it had already come out. So, I figured we'll go ahead and start with Captive State, which I pretty much had to go into entirely blind, because I really, not that I would watch trailers or advertisements anyway, but I really just didn't even hear much about it, like, at all. The only thing I knew was that Rupert Wyatt did it, and John Goodman was apparently the star of it, which really was enough to get me to go, because Rupert Wyatt obviously did Rise of the Planet of the Apes, and has worked with John Goodman before in the botched remake of The Gambler, that I really didn't care for, but John Goodman's three scenes in The Gambler are far and away the best scenes in that movie. And now he was, well, when I say he's the star of this, he's first credited, but that's not necessarily an indication of his screen time, but as you can probably guess. And it appeared to be, obviously, some sort of alien invasion thing, kind of somewhere between, like, Cloverfield and District 9 or something. The idea was really, really vague when I went, and I wasn't sure exactly what the story was. And the movie itself kind of tried to tell me what the story was, but very quickly, with a shitload of information all at once, all in text, flashing rather quickly, and yeah, I think I got most of it, but it is an interesting sort of take on the alien invasion movie, because it's not exactly what you might be thinking, because obviously most people think of, like, Independence Day or War of the Worlds or something like that, but they're really trying to take this other approach, where it's kind of, they sort of take control, and then they're like kind of the all-seeing eye, but there's also the layers of it, where you have one of the first scene with John Goodman is him watching Ashton Sanders, who is from Moonlight. And it's sort of this, he's sort of the all-seeing eye here, and then the all-seeing eye behind him, and it's very quickly you realize that the whole movie is just one big-ass allegory, and not in any way a subtle one, and that's kind of what they're gonna commit to without really adding any other ideas to it, until we get to this whole rise-up thing. So, and at the start, after we've gotten all the information, or no, before, this is like the pre-title thing, excuse me, there is the introduction of the main character, who will eventually be Ashton Sanders when he grows up, with his parents, and we kind of see what appears to be like the start of this alien invasion. We're kind of in the midst of it, I'm not sure where exactly, but we do get a glimpse of their design, which is a pretty unsettling scene, but for me, probably for a couple of reasons. Because this was an interesting experience in the theater, because, number one, I was the only person in there, and secondly, the bulb in the projector seemed to be on its last legs, because throughout the entire movie, and the ads at the beginning too, there was like a flicker where it would be normal, and then it would kind of go dark a little bit, like slightly darker, but to the point that you could notice, and kind of back and forth through the whole thing. And then I had heard after the movie, I guess there were already complaints that the movie itself just looks too dark in general, so that on top of it was kind of fucking with me a little bit, but even so, this, and then but the thing still, though, is we see sort of the design of these aliens immediately, which is interesting, because usually it's the case of, if it's one of those we're not going to show you the aliens very much movies, they sort of make you wait it out and wait it out and wait it out, and then they kind of give you a big finale of sorts that shows you all the stuff they came up with. This one's kind of the reverse. We get a real close-up shot of one of the aliens immediately, where it's like, I mean, we obviously see them as sort of a silhouette, but then as they get closer in this very, very dark shot, it's like their whole bodies are made out of, like, these, almost looks like hair of sorts, that then comes out and turns them into basically a giant porcupine, just with, you know, a human-like limbs and a head and all that. And what they look like underneath is hidden by all of this that we do see in one scene, and it's incredibly underwhelming and kind of pointless too. We don't really need to know. Like if they just looked like that, that's all that would really matter. But but there's a lot of stuff this movie does that doesn't really seem to have a whole lot of a point, while also trying to do. I can't tell if it's not doing enough or doing way too much. It's it says a whole lot about the movie that I honestly can't really tell, because you have a very high concept, but they try to the plots you could write on like in like one sentence on a napkin, but then once things start to get revealed, it becomes way too complicated. I don't know what the hell the intent was here, but it's all extremely frustrating as it goes. And as I said, they really get sort of caught up in what appears to be the, hey, this is an allegory for the way things are now, somewhat, kind of, but then that kind of doesn't. When they basically give up because that's all they have, the second half of the movie just pretty much turns into a various array of what appear to be shots made for a trailer. Where you can say, oh, that's a really nice shot. It doesn't really have any particular context, but it's nice looking, and then just that periodically until it gets to this really jumbled, we're going to throw as much, surprise information at you as possible. But it is one of those cases where the ending seems to be like looking like it's doing some big reveal, but it's not really so much one of those cases of, oh, we thought something was this, but it's actually this, and all that. It's just, oh no, there's just a whole bunch of shit we weren't telling you. That if we had told you at the beginning, wouldn't really make too much of a difference. But whatever. We do have quite a recognizable cast list here, like I was talking about, Goodman and Ashton Sanders. Then we also have Vera Farmiga, Kevin Dunn, Alan Ruck, Kevin J. O'Connor, James Ransone. A number of those actors that are always in like those really small parts that you see around and you always recognize. But the thing is that even though that's like the cast list, like the cast list is full of these people, you can take Vera Farmiga out of this probably. Most of her parts tend to be bigger, but which is really funny because she's like totally wasted in this. She has like 2 scenes that barely amount to anything at all. She is kind of involved in she is very much involved with what the supposed twist is, but just with the way the movie has gone up about itself up to this point, everything that's revealed just feels so who gives a fuck? Especially when you see, like, a lot of the characters in this that I didn't mention that aren't played by the people I mentioned are, like, the most crucial characters in the movie, but they, like, barely have any dialogue. They're just kind of introduced in the movie and just kind of start doing shit. There's really nothing to them apart from they have a particular job and this particular mission to hopefully sort of, rebel against what's going on. And it's kind of hard to tell, because it's these characters also, because they have no real identifying qualities, just kind of keep popping up, and you kind of have to remind yourself, like, what were they doing before? And then by the time you somewhat figure it out, it just kind of doesn't matter anymore. So that's really the best way I can describe it, is this is just kind of frustrating to watch, this whole thing. Like I said, that whole thing of feels like it's doing too little, but also trying to do too much at the same time, which sounds like it doesn't make sense. But that's once again, that's exactly what's so frustrating about it, is it just doesn't add up at all. Well, I mean, I suppose once everything is revealed at the end and we get the information that they should have just fucking given us up front, like, it's not like they just kind of made shit up as they went. It seemed like they had something thought out here. But once again, just how the way it's all revealed, it just doesn't have any impact whatsoever. Like, I just could not give the slightest fuck whatever the next thing was that was going to happen. Not to mention, Ashton Sanders kind of seems to be our main character for a while. But when we start bringing in all these characters that we're not even really introduced to, they just start happening. He's just kind of isolated for a large portion of the movie. Almost like we're supposed to forget about him, which is not really the case. It's just they didn't know how to shuffle up all their characters evenly. So we've just got shit that's just all over the damn place all the time, throughout the entire thing. And as far as like, you know, what you would expect, like thinking about other movies like District 9 or Cloverfield or like Overlord or something, kind of came to mind also. Not that I would want it to like be those movies, because we already had those movies, but like, I mean, like tonally, where like at first I was wondering if it was going to be something like sort of tonally like Overlord, which obviously is not the case at all, but also it's not near as well made as that movie, or not near as exciting as that movie, or really any of the other ones we're talking about, Cloverfield, District 9, whatever. So another problem here is when I was talking about how it seems to have this massive idea, but not a lot of ideas to go with it, or at least not a lot of interesting ones, I guess I should say, where it's like it doesn't have enough to go into this, but at the same time, with the concept, feels like something more appropriate for like a series or a franchise or something. But then after you've seen the movie, it's like you just have no hope in that whatsoever. And I mean, it's not even like it's trying to set up like it would have been a franchise movie, but it's like it just feels like the idea is so big, and there's like so many things you could do in the middle of it. But you've got it condensed to this hour 49 movie that just doesn't really have any ideas. It kind of feels like really cheated if you go into it sort of hoping they'll build on that. But no, there's not really any of that. Every now and then there's a somewhat intense scene. Like there's like a surgical scene that's pretty intense for a minute. And then there's like a whole sequence involving a football stadium, which, while not necessarily as intense as it probably should be, it feels like really, really cinematic. So it's got that going for it, I guess. But I don't know. There's just there's, like, I can't say that enough. Way too much and way too little going on at the same time. And as far as caring about any of the characters, like I said, they're all either they might as well practically be faceless, a lot of them, let alone nameless. But then, like, after a while, it does sort of try to bring in, like, making some of the situations more personal to the characters. But by the time this happens, it is, like, long past too late. Like, we are just way, way past giving any sort of fuck whatsoever by the time that comes along. So, yeah, so I don't know if I can say that I was disappointed, because I really didn't have any particular expectation. But there's still something here where it's like, you just kind of really expected something out of this, especially with the fact that there's like practically non-existent marketing, and the fact that I was the only one in the theater sort of made me think it could potentially have been one of those movies that isn't seen enough, where it's like all of it went into the quality so that the marketing was pretty much non-existent, because that happens so much. But no, this movie's going to get about the audience it needs, which is not a whole lot. Which is really unfortunate, because like I said, this really great array of actors here, it's really cool to see them in a movie that's like so big. But it just fucking sucks that it's this one. So, yeah, so that's unfortunate. Unfortunate for Goodman, too, because I was really kind of hyped for the idea of, like, him having, like, a leading role in a movie this big, you know, like the last time he had, like, a leading role, as far as I can tell, at least in a type of movie like this, it was another movie with Cloverfield in the title, and that obviously worked out very well for him, but, yeah, it sucks that this is the fate that this movie's gonna have, and the fact that its quality pretty much matches it, so that sucks. So let's go on to the Netflix movie, Triple Frontier, which is the new movie by J.C. Chandor, who did Margin Call, All Is Lost, and A Most Violent Year. Incredibly versatile director. He's also the co-writer on this also. The opening credit sequence actually set to For Whom the Bell Tolls, of all things. Shockingly, any similarities to Zombieland end right there. So what I didn't know about this that the beginning credits told me was that Mark Bowl and Catherine Bigelow were producers on it, and that Mark Bowl he has a co-writing credit, but I think I heard that he actually wrote it, and then J.C. Chandler rewrote it, but they both got the writing credit because there was still enough there. And it's like I can kind of see where this is like a Mark Bowl story that got rewritten. It's pretty easy to see that. But despite some middling things I was hearing, because I'm like a week and a half late on it, I liked this so much better than I kind of thought that I would, especially with, Netflix's name on it, because I'll be one of the very first people to just totally and completely talk shit on Netflix's original movies. Though I do kind of have to hand it to them this year, because unlike a fair amount of people, I really like Velvet Buzzsaw. I haven't talked about it yet, but they've also put out High Flying Bird and Paddleton this year also, so it's like, okay, it's only March, and they've got these to their name already. Maybe this will be a decent year for them. We'll have to see. I'm not holding my breath because it's Netflix, but I mean, they're off to a decent start. I mean, they've obviously already put out Polar and shit, but still, there's much. They already have more. More good movies this year from January to March than they pretty much did in the entirety of last year and the year before that. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, now as far as the plot to this, it is pretty simple and something that we've more or less seen before. Where Oscar Isaac gets wind of a drug lord that he's been after that's hiding a shitload of money somewhere. Shitload is putting it as mildly as you possibly can, the amount of money that's at stake here. And so he decides he's going to get his old buddies back together to rob this money. So we've got Ben Affleck, Charlie Hunnam, Garrett Hedlund, and Pedro Pascal. Amazing cast list on this movie. And they're all, like, there's something about the camaraderie here that really is the heart of the movie, and I think is the reason the movie works as well as it does. Because, like I said, the plot is pretty much nothing we haven't already seen before, where it's like, it's half heist movie, half survival movie, which is an interesting combination, but I mean, the heist movie we get and the survival movie we get are stuff we've seen before. They just combine them now. But it does work really well, but still... And I can understand complaints that the characters aren't fleshed out enough, and they have, motivations that are very, by the numbers. Affleck in particular, we see, like, now that he's back in his normal life and he's retired, he's got, like, this dead-end life as a failed real estate guy, and real estate guy. And he's just separated from his wife, and his daughter are, like, there's this disconnect between them that he really wants to try to come back from, and we get this shot of him watching his daughter walk away, longingly hoping, he can repair that, despite the fact that she's a teenager and ignores him most of the time. And Pedro Pascal throws out, like, hey, I just had a baby. And that's about it, as far as what we're given. But it's the way they interact, where the second these characters see each other, like, one of the first scenes is Oscar Isaac going to get Charlie Hunnam, and then we immediately sense that, they have a history together and a background, and this is like a really close bond that the two of them have. And then Charlie Hunnam says, I'm not going to do this unless Affleck does it. So that's already set up, but then once Affleck starts to interact with them, it's like, you can immediately see all the history as they interact, and then you bring in all the other characters. Garrett Hedlund's just kind of dropped in unceremoniously. He's the brother of Charlie Hunnam, I believe. But still, just there's little moments when, like, the way Garrett Hedlund agrees to, take part in this, feels so nonchalant, but at the same time just feels so, all the characters and their relationships feel so lived in up to this point. And that's just where the big strength of the movie is, and that's going to be what carries us through, how much we care about them when the shit's hitting the fan for the rest of the movie. And as far as the action goes, obviously Shandor has shown that this is kind of the first time he's taken on like a real, big action movie. There, if I remember correctly, I haven't seen it since it came out. There was a pretty nice chase scene in A Most Violent Year, I want to say. Obviously, there was a lot of intensity in All Is Lost, but these are like really, really big action scenes, and for the most part, I think they're. I mean, I think they're fine, but I also think I'm holding it up to Netflix standards. So, based on that bar, I do think it's put together pretty competently, especially for a guy that hasn't, directed like some big action movie like this. I had actually heard that I guess some people were complaining because I guess the ads make it look like it's pretty much a non-stop action movie to the point that people were complaining that they didn't think it had enough action in it and they felt misdirected. I'm curious what the ads look like because I thought this had a shitload of action in it, especially at the beginning. And I was kind of put off at first talking about the way the action scenes are put together because like as it goes on, like there's a crash sequence that's like really really good and really intense, even if it looks a tad CGI'd, still like just the stakes in general of it, I think, amplify it and go above, whether the CGI is perfect or not, or if they could have gone a bit more authentic with how it was made. But still, um, there is the beginning sequence where it does feel like it's one of those cases where there's a lot of shooting, there's a lot of people, dying and all that. There's people shooting at this and people shooting this way, and there's not a whole lot of seemingly coherency or a particular. It's just all kind of all over the place, and like to the point that after a while it doesn't feel like it matters what's even going on here and why. But then as it goes on, like I said, it's really about the strength of the characters' bonds that really brings the movie together, and that's when we start actually feeling the action scenes. And I think that's another reason why it's like, even if they're not perfectly constructed action scenes, just how much you care about the characters after meeting them and seeing them together, I think is really what still ends up making them work anyway. Um, and as far as the performances go, like the individual ones, yeah, there's obviously going to be a lot of like franticness and doing really high stakes things while a clock is ticking, and then there is sort of the desperation of it. It's particularly the Affleck character, where it's after we've seen him and we've seen the interaction with his daughter and all that. There's the particular sequence in the movie where the Affleck character wants to take. I was talking about just how much money is at stake, and Affleck wants as much of that as he can possibly get, no matter what it means in regards to them getting back with it, and not taking that into consideration and potentially making this all crumble. But the great thing that Affleck does here in this performance is we really sort of feel like just his hollowness at the beginning and just how much contempt he has for seemingly his own existence given the situation that he's in now, and just how badly he wants to fix that and sort of make life with his daughter like more or less normal. And so this job is basically the key to that for him. So when his character starts suddenly making these rash decisions once his eyes see this money, it's sort of like it'd probably be really easy to dismiss the character as like being greedy and making stupid decisions and all that, but he sells the desperation of it so much. Like when he's starting to say we need to get as much as possible, just really really going for when everybody's saying they need to leave now. It really does not feel like greed in the moment at all. I saw nothing but his desperation and his want to make that happen, regardless of how much he may be throwing this plan off the rails, when he was one of the people that so meticulously put it together in the first place. And that's one of those cases, too, where it's like, I mean, it is also one of those cases of we've already seen this territory before, but it's like, I could see people getting frustrated because it's characters doing things that they may not do in another situation or may not have been what they did before, but it's like when you throw in just the amount of money that they have come across, it's very easy to see how these characters will What's great, though, is they don't do the cliche thing. The cliche thing would be, like, the whole sort of a simple plan scenario where everybody's sort of, starting to turn on each other or whatever, or one goes rogue or whatever. And they don't take that route, which I do really like. And once again, would have made it a lot more predictable. It also, like I said, makes the bonds even stronger between the characters and just shows that any sort of stupid decision they make is because this is an amount of money none of them ever thought they would ever see, and it's clearly altering their minds and their decision-making process in ways that, may ultimately fuck this up. So, I pretty much buy anything in regards to that, as far as the characters and the decisions they make and all that, whether good or bad or smart or dumb or whatever. The locations also, like, as far as the use of location and the way, the settings and all that, this whole background that we're on throughout this whole thing, when it becomes like more of a survival movie, also is just really, like I said, just really gives it this, enormous feel. It's such a backwards thing where it's like, this really feels like a movie that's sort of made for theaters, and something like Captive State probably should have gone to Netflix instead. They should really switch places, but yeah, so I really like just the feel and the scale of it also. But there's the one thing, though, that kind of kept throwing me off, was this sort of, I was talking about For the Bell Tolls being the opening credit sequence. Yeah, there's kind of that whole arbitrary soundtrack, like, kind of throughout it. Like, the way they use the chain also, and then it kind of starts to get a bit too on the nose later when we get, like, Bob Dylan coming in and all that. And it's like, it's not as, arbitrary as, like, Suicide Squad or anything, and it especially feels off because it's like, most of the first half of the movie until shit starts to go down, and then it's still kind of in there sporadically, but for some reason it's really heavy, at the start, and it's, that just kind of seemed like overkill and money they didn't need to spend. So, yeah. So, that's really how I feel about that. Yeah. So, as far as character work goes, I do think, like I said, the camaraderie between the actors is so strong. It really does make up for any, lacking in backstory we might have. And like I said, as far as motivations go, it's, like I said, given the context of everything, and the, directions of the story itself, that's kind of the thing too, where it's like, this is one of those movies where what exactly would the movie be if every single character made every single right decision? They could still work with that. Admittedly, they could. But yeah, I still, like this well enough, and I said the performances really carry it, and the action is well done enough. There are some very, very intense scenes, and that's all I would really have expected out of this. Once again, much like Captive State, I really didn't even know what I was in for. I just knew the title, the director, and some of the cast. So that's what that... Like, I didn't know Garrett Hedlund was in it until I started watching it, but, yeah, so... Yeah, I'm fine with that, but I can see where people might have their problems. But like I said, I just have the bar of Netflix so incredibly low. I'm totally willing to be forgiving of a movie like this and the flaws it may have. So, yes. And I can't credit that Affleck performance enough. I really loved him in this. So, that's what these two are. Next week is Us, isn't it? Peele's new movie. Which should be very interesting, and whatever else probably comes up. I'm still planning on doing that whole catch-up video for the movies of this year, with, like, stuff that I saw a while back but haven't talked about yet, like Isn't It Romantic and The Prodigy and stuff like that, High Flying Bird and all those, Paddleton. So, yeah, all of that will be coming, and the verses I'm hopefully trying to get back on track. I kind of, yeah, got all fucked up there at some point, but I'm trying to get back into it. So, if that interests you, then that will hopefully be there. So, until all of that stuff, I think that's it.